Yeah. I can send them a copy if they don't manage to make it tonight.
All right.
So, the resources for the qualification are all up here. The qualification specification, feedback forms, what we use, booklets and tips on diagnostic assessment, a letter template, ebooks and handouts. If you click something like that, oops, it will open you up into a new page, and it'll give you a whole list of assessment plan template, assessment for learning, designing lessons, effective professional discussion, examples of observations and documents, observation record template, professional discussion, reflective practice for assessors, the reflective teacher, and then Unit 2 and Unit 3 assessment evidence. Yeah, we'll go back from that. I don't need to cut too much on that. But a lot of the background information that you need will be on there, but also there's quite a bit of stuff on the actual units themselves. So Unit 1 has got, again, the specification. I've done an assignment brief for Units 1 and 3. Gives you an idea of what you're supposed to be doing. I'll just click on that. Oh, has it started doing this again? Just a second. Here we are. This is just an outline that I wrote to read through. For Unit 1, you can decide on your 2 learners and get copies of the different types of assessment documentation that you produce with them, and this will provide the bulk of evidence for this unit with the explanations that you're going to have to fill in on the task sheets to show that the knowledge and understanding goes with it.
Oh, where can I find that?
I'm going to show you that in a minute. Yeah. Unit 3, much of the documentation you produce in this one can be displayed here, and with just explanations of what each one is, and that basically completes that unit.
Okay.
The PowerPoint presentations on here as well covers much of the knowledge base information as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, any further questions you've got can be covered by email in the usual way, but we've added a dimension now as well. You'll get my phone number as well.
Okay.
So if you need a quick response for something you're not sure about, you can always text me, and I'll give you a response as soon as I can.
All right, that's good.
Try and move it on. Put that one back. Now on the bottom here, I've put a workbook for Unit 1.
Okay, I can see the workbook.
Yeah. And each of these has now got a list of tasks. Yeah. And those tasks cover parts of each of the learning objectives and assessment criteria of the actual unit itself. So if you look at the first one, I've got to save every one of them. Right, okay. Now again, each one of these tasks, this one's actually task 8, I've not put them in any specific order, but it doesn't matter. This looks at the training cycle, yeah? So just put your name at the top, and then in correct order, identify the 5 stages of the training cycle, and for each of the 5 stages, explain what is involved. Yeah?
Okay.
Now you can start writing in the box, and if you need it will get bigger should you need it to get bigger as you write, yeah?
All right, okay.
The second part is, please explain how formative and summative assessments are used within the 5 stages of training cycle. Make sure you include definitions of both formative and summative assessment, and remember not to include bullet points in your response. That applies all the way through the tasks that I've set. Bullet points are not enough at this level. It needs the bit behind there to explain it so that I can see that the understanding's there, yeah?
Okay.
And that is task 1 of them. Unit 1 task 8 is in this case. Let's hold that back. Each one is exactly the same.
Okay.
Different questions, obviously, but exactly the same format. Yeah.
So we could actually download it as a Ziploc document.
Yeah, you say you can go into this anytime. Just download it on. Once you've got your name in, you then save it in your name, and you know, when you've got a couple of them done, or 2 or 3 of them done, send them through to me and I'll have a look at them.
Okay.
Task 3, adapting assessment methods. But we saw some of the assessment scenarios that detail learners with individual needs. And you have to identify these needs and suggest changes that you can make to the assessment in order to include this learner. Consider the following for each scenario. Presenting it in a different format, translations, a recorded discussion, extra time, digital recordings, the use of a scribe or reader, and adapted for use with computer or e-assessment, e-portfolio, and online submissions just like we do.
Okay.
Again, the use of bullet points is not acceptable. I'll keep reminding you of that as it goes through on each one.
Okay.
Okay, the scenario is you've chosen to set a written exam to assess your learners. However, you're aware that one of your learners has a visual impairment, which makes it very hard for him to read the test paper. In the box below, explain how you can adapt the planned assessment activity to meet the needs of this learner. And again, just write in the box about how you will actually get around that issue.
Okay.
Scenario 2 is a core component of your qualification requires a written exam, but you have a learner where English is a second language. Spoken English is fine. However, written English is full of grammar mistakes, punctuation and spelling mistakes. It makes it very hard to understand the work. In the box below, explain how you can adapt the assessment activity to meet the needs of this particular learner. With all these sort of fixed learning difficulties, there are probably several ways that you can actually get round the issue, but just pick one out that you can understand or say something about, and explain how you will go about that. Yeah.
Okay. And do we have the possible answers in the PowerPoint?
Sorry.
Do I need to research that, or do we have?
You'll have the information. I'm going back to that in a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, you got a third scenario as well on here. Yeah. Always scroll down on these because some have 2, some have 3. Okay, let's close that back a minute. If I close the workbooks down, I'll go back from there. We look at PowerPoint 1. I'll look at we'll go for the first one. We'll do PowerPoint 1. We haven't drawn. No, there we are. Oops, it's a bit big now. That's better. Each of the PowerPoints, I'll go through. This one is, there are 20 odd slides on here. Some of the ones I've put them in if I was had a big group and we could do an exercise and things like that. So some of them won't apply really, but you can have a look through these. So we look at what the presentation will cover. It's looking at why should assessment take place, the key concepts of assessment, principles, VAXA and SMART, role and responsibility of the assessor, regulations and legislation relating to assessment, policies and procedures.
Yeah.
Summary quiz, which we won't do, and a reading list and a website list. You can, if you want to do some further research, there's some of that in there as well. But I'll just go through. I'm not going to go through each slide with you. I mean, obviously, quite careful of doing that on your own afterwards. I'm just directing you to where everything is at the moment. Did you get an email with a number of things that you could collect?
Yeah, I did an induction yesterday, and I think he subsequently sent an email of some of the documents that I will need as evidence.
Yeah. Now, a point I will make now, while I'm discussing that, before I go on to this, is when you use documentation, it's got to be actual documentation that's been filled in for a particular learner or two learners. Make sure that you remove the learner's name from the documentation when you use it, yeah?
Okay.
That's the only thing you need to remove, just the learner's name. You can call them in your script, learner A and B, or 1 and 2, whatever you like, yeah? Just so that they can't be identified from the work you produced. Although, having said that, the only people that will see this are myself and the IQA that does the work for me, which will be Raman, and yourself. So, yeah. So why do you think assessment should take place with learners?
So that we'll be able to test for their learning, if they actually have achieved the learning objective?
Yeah, you're asking basically with the assessment, what have you learned? Yeah? How much of what we've delivered have you learned? So that's the important part of assessment. It's making sure that what's been delivered has actually been accepted by the learner and understood.
Okay.
So yeah, to ascertain if learning's occurred, skills, competence, knowledge, understanding, and or attitudes need at a given point. If you didn't assess, you wouldn't know whether learning had taken place. And that is how, in schools, assessment is becoming more and more used as evidence of learning taking place. Because there's been a lot of, how should I say, failure is the wrong word, but a lot of students or learners get left behind at school, and they don't pick it up with sort of until they take an exam sometime at the end of the year and say, oh no, they've not done very well, have they? So yeah. the ongoing assessment in schools now is of vital importance.
Okay.
Just bring you up. So assessment should focus on improving and reinforcing learning as well as measuring achievement. It can, certainly with the way you have been doing your assessments and the way I do mine, is it does that reinforcement. It will say, yes, that's okay, but you could look at doing this or expanding that or giving that a deeper analysis to actually improve. Quite a lot of qualifications now are becoming graded. And if the assessment's just coming through to pass all the time, you should be asking questions. Why is it only coming through to pass? Should we be looking at moving on and doing the additional work to reach the merit at least? But again, you've got to know your students and or learners to know whether they're capable of doing that or whether they'll just make a pass. So you can actually, within a group, you can actually do different work with that group for the different levels of attainment.
Okay.
Key concepts of assessment, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are the ones we mentioned in that task, actually. So it's an evaluation, to some extent. It can be internally or externally devised assessment methods, formal and informal. Sometimes with younger children, it's very much an informal exercise or possibly a group discussion where the assessor and tutor can see who's getting involved in the discussion, who's answering the questions, who's not answering the questions and hanging back, yeah? so that you can make that assessment of what needs to be done to pick those learners up. Yeah.
Okay.
Looking at progression, as I mentioned before, where you can get further or reach a higher grade if possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the assessments have got to be transparent. The learner needs to know exactly what's going to be assessed and what's going to be looked at, so that they can understand where they fit into this assessment process. The different types of assessment. Obviously, initial assessment is at the beginning, and in some cases now, a lot of, certainly in core skills or functional skills as they're now called, where assessment takes place, and they're probably a diagnostic as well afterwards to find out if they're between levels, how far on are they between levels, yeah, and where do they need to, the tutor need to put the input to move them on to the next level. Formative assessment, Formative assessment is something, as we said earlier, we both use by making a start with a unit, giving the learners to bring some work in and have a look at it, giving some directional feedback, and then continuing with that unit. And of course, as the unit finishes, there's then a summative assessment at the end. I'll go through the process or the documentation I use with you as we progress through a unit. I'll show you that in when we finish this PowerPoint. Principles are how the assessment is put into practice. It's got to be ethical. It's got to be fair. It's got to be safe. In other words, it must meet the criteria. But then the two principles are known as VAXA and SMART. You've probably seen those before. I don't know. VAXA is valid, authentic, current, sufficient, and reliable.
Yeah.
Valid, it's got to be valid for the process. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be the learner's work. It's got to be current and up to date. Some of this I've never totally agreed with. They will only allow you to use certain qualifications of a certain age. When they get past a certain age, they say they're not current. I'm not actually sure about that. Anyway, there's got to be enough of it, and it's got to be reliable. In other words, it's not got to be taken from elsewhere and put together. Like we do a plagiarism scan on every one of the students' work that we use to just check that it's been correctly referenced and it doesn't actually just copy and paste materially.
Yeah.
And SMART, of course, is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. The last part of that is sometimes abused. Now, there are many reasons for that. In formal education, it's perhaps not quite as abused because it's full-time education. They're in that mode. But sometimes when you've got people like yourself who are doing this part-time when you're working, sometimes you've not time to do something or it gets left. So it does drag on a little bit, but that's to be expected within this type of qualification. So your main role is to carry out assessments according to the qualification requirements, or those of the programme or job specification being assessed, and to follow all internal and external organisational requirements. Sometimes within an organisation you'll have a period for assessment. In other words, the lesson planning will go so far, and then there'll be a break for assessment and revision and stuff like that. So it depends on each internal organisation. Will have different processes and policies. They'll not be very different, but they'll be just particular to any school or college. I've met many over the last 30 odd years I've been doing it, but none of them have been that different. They've all been trying to achieve something. Trying to achieve a similar thing. Yeah, just you going about it a different way.
Okay.
What are your responsibilities as an assessor?
What are my responsibilities as an assessor?
Attending interminable meetings,
Okay.
negotiating and agreeing assessment plans, making best use of different types of assessment and methods, reviewing learner progress, and standardising practice with other assessors, and completing and maintaining records.
Okay.
To give examples of some of that, I do some IQA work for a company in Bolton that are in the construction business, and their site managers now have to have a level 6 qualification, which consists of about 19 units. Quite a bit of it overlaps. Now, yes, they can produce documentary evidence to a certain degree, but they also need more than that to actually fulfil the requirements. Now, the assessor in that case decided, because these guys are all professionals and have been in the game for a long time, rather than making them write reams of paper about, he's done recorded professional discussions.
Okay.
Those have been excellent because he's put them onto disk or pen drive, and I, as the IQA, can then stick the pen drive in and just sample a few and listen to what he said against the criteria and say, yeah, that's okay. I can see that's matching exactly what's needed. So there are various methods we can use now to achieve the same result without going to, making people jump through hoops, if you like. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the reasons we've chosen this format to do this qualification is because it's user friendly for the person going through it, and if you've got experience as an assessor already, then or you're in a position to gather the evidence, it's a fairly quick qualification.
Okay.
So the responsibilities, going further, but also you've got this word standardising practice with other assessors. How do you think you would do that?
To standardize as an assessor.
What it means? Sorry?
We hold standardization meeting with, when I did my teaching course, we usually hold standardization meeting with my, so yeah.
The IQA is supposed to hold these periodically with assessors, and what I generally do is I'll pick a piece of students' work anonymously, give everybody a copy of it, and then make an assessment of that piece of work, or section of work, and see where the decision's made to either pass it or not pass it. Okay. What we then do is sit around and have a discussion, and each assessor will justify the reasons for giving that decision. Yeah. And it's not a blame culture to try and catch everybody out. It's to look at it and discuss it across the qualification to agree the best way of assessing a certain piece of work and how it should be assessed and what resources are needed for it to make sure it's standard and fair right across the qualification. And again, completing and maintaining records, which is most important. As an IQA, one of the things I see most is that paperwork will come through. It will have the candidate's name on. It will have the assessor's name on somewhere. There can be dates missing. There can be signatures missing. There can be all sorts of things because they've not been completed properly. And that's one of the things that an IQA will pick out straight away. So it's always better to make sure when you're completing documentation, make sure it's got all the things that are needed. Dates are most important, as are decisions, and signatures to make sure that it's been signed off.
Okay. They'll pick up on the date of submission?
Yeah, dates of assessment, when it was completed, and you've got the signature and date when it was signed off. And somewhere, usually, it'll be the date it was actually assessed as well. Because if you're going through a qualification, certain units will be assessed on certain dates and then signed off probably 2 or 3 days later, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Do you need to fill out the section with the internal assessor and all that? Do you need to fill out all that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So it's giving constructive feedback and development feedback to learners, identifying and dealing with any barriers to fair assessment, that was it, part of the question on that one about what you do with learners with a difficulty or a barrier to learning, yeah, how you get around that. Making judgments based on the assessment requirements and the assessment requirements only. Maintaining continual professional development yourself, CPD. One of the reasons you're doing this qualification, that's part of your CPD, yeah?
Yeah.
Supporting learners with, supporting learners with special assessment requirements and dealing with sensitive issues in a supportive manner. Part of the inclusive teaching, learning and assessment process. Regulations pertaining to assessment. You'll need to know certain regulations of the regulatory bodies such as Ofsted and Ofqual.
Yeah.
Awarding organisations that accredit the qualifications. You mentioned BTEC that you were doing on yours, yeah?
Yes.
They're probably, well, we've got about 4 or 5 awarding bodies that we use for different qualifications, yeah. So it's understanding what the rules and regulations are as to how you actually go about the process with from registration right through to signing off certification. Excuse me. So the legal aspects such as Data Protection, Health and Safety at Work Act, Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act, Equality Act, Counter-Terrorism, believe it or not, and the Security Act 2015. This is where we, as a tutor and an assessor, you need to look at where you think radicalisation could have taken place. There may be signs. So data protection is mandatory for all organisations. It's now been just updated again in this back end of last year. It came into force, I think it was January this year. It's slightly changed. The regulations very slightly changed, but it's worded a lot clearer now as well. Oh, at the bottom of there, these are awarding bodies on the bottom of here.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
ATHE, digital marketing, NCFE.
Yeah. The Act contains 8 principles to ensure data are processed fairly and lawfully, obtained and used only for specified and lawful purposes, adequate, relevant and not excessive, accurate and, where necessary, kept up to date, kept for no longer than necessary, processed in accordance with the individual's rights, kept secure and transferred only to countries that offer adequate protection. If I deal with many learners who are not, English is not their first language, they come from many countries around the world. Now, we have to carry certain information before we can register them, and that is kept, it's got to be kept securely to meet the Act's regulations.
Okay.
Even, as I said to you before, the work that you produce will go between 3 people. Okay. The only time a 4th person will be involved is if any of your work was chosen by the external quality assurer from the awarding body to have a look at and sample when they came in to look. Now, a lot of the qualifications we have on here are what they call direct claim status, where we don't need to have the EQA come in to pass them off. they will come in just to check all our procedures are up to date periodically, but we can actually claim certification when it's finished. That's the difference on there.
Okay.
But anytime your work comes in, it only goes between me and you, and at the end, a sample of that will go to the IQA to see, and that's it. On the system that we use, where your work is stored, you will send work in, by the way, to learnerwork@ukversity.co.uk, yeah?
Okay.
Once you do that, it's then sent to the relevant tutor assessor to do the marking and send it back and with the feedback to you. That goes into there, and only certain people have access to that. Other than that, no one can access the work in there. Yeah.
Okay.
Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. This has been amended and had a number of things added to it over the years since then. I'm quite conversant with this, as I used to be an assessor in the engineering sector. As before I had life as a tutor, I was a mechanical engineer. And the Health and Safety at Work Act is most important in there, because if you're doing assessments out in the workplace, risk assessments have to be done, a whole range of things have to be done to make sure that the area is safe and the work methods are safe as well.
Yeah.
It's also, if you're setting up a classroom, it needs to make sure there are no potential hazards. If you were giving a lecture using, say, a projector, make sure the cables are all tidy and covered so nobody can go stumbling all over them and things like that. It's just using common sense as much as anything else to make sure that you set up and make sure that the resources that you're using and the setup for the room you're using is safe. If you see a potential hazard, it's a responsibility to do something about it before an accident occurs, even if you're just reporting it to a relevant person within your organisation.
Okay.
Safeguarding vulnerable groups. It's a term used to refer to the duties and responsibility that those providing a health, social or educational service have to perform to protect individuals and vulnerable people from harm. A disclosure and barring service is in place to check on staff if necessary. I need to get my basic one updated as well. Let's come round there. The Equality Act in 2010 replaced all previous anti-discrimination legislation and consolidated into one act. It provides the rights for people not to be discriminated against or harassed because they have an association with a disabled person or are wrongly perceived as disabled. It's what do you call a disability? There are lots of people who have disabilities that are not absolutely visible, but then there they are. I have an enhancement hearing thing on my machine here to make sure I can hear you because I have a hearing problem. But that was back from my old engineering days when it was I worked in very noisy places.
Okay.
Now, the Counter-Terrorism Act and Security Act of 2015, this will apply if you work with learners who are at risk of becoming radicalised. The prevent duty is part of this act, and most of us, I don't know, have you had any prevent training yet?
Yes, I have.
Ah, right, yeah, most of us have gone through prevent training to make sure we're aware of what that the duty is in safeguarding resources. And the stuff is free, actually, on prevent and for training there. So, again, it's finding out what organisational policies and procedures you have to follow. Getting a synopsis or a copy of those, if you like.
Okay.
What's up with this? It's jumping. Right. So we're going to look at what they may include: access to fair assessment, appeals and complaints procedure, confidentiality of information, copyright and data protection, equality and diversity, health, safety and welfare, and internal quality assurance. So those are the policies that will cover the area of assessment within any organisation. They may be worded differently and, or outlined differently, but basically that's what they will cover.
Okay.
Summary quiz, there's only us on, so it's not really point in giving that. Just look, why should assessment take place? It's just a recap of what we've just done. State 2 examples of key concepts of assessment, what is VAXA and what is SMART, and explain the principles, what the principles of assessment are.
Okay.
The reading list on here that we've got on the BLE, sorry, on Moodle. And finally, there's some further information on the debarring service, and government legislation at work, Ofqual and Ofsted, and Prevent for Training. All those are accessible straight off this link here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, this presentation has covered why should assessment take place, the key concepts of assessment, principles of assessment, VAXA and SMART, roles and responsibilities of an assessor, regulations and legislation relating to assessment, policies and procedures, a reading list and a website list. Now that is, I'm going to cut that on there because I want to drop back and look at some other stuff before we close tonight. Let me close that down. Right, here we are. I'm going to open this one. Now this is the document I'm going to use for your assessment. When you send some work in to me,
yeah,
I will put this document at the head of your work. So every time we send it backwards and forwards to sign something off or complete something, make sure it's just the same document. You said don't rename it, just keep sending it backwards and forwards until it's complete. So okay. I will change it from assignment front sheet to assessment front sheet. I'll put your name in there. It's got the unit on here, Unit 1, Understanding Principles of Practice of Assessment. Okay. It will say, expand from the information in your PowerPoint. This is suggested evidence in there, and compare strengths and limitations of assessment. All the things that you'll pay. If you do your tasks, yeah?
Yeah.
We'll then identify the tasks to the assessment criteria, yeah? And all I'll write in here for your assessment, completed task 3 or completed task 8 or whatever it is that matches up with that one. I'll change this. It'll get an A in it all the way down. NYA will become page number, and it will be the page number of your workbook that goes in there, yeah? So that it can be easily got to if somebody wants to do the IQA on it, they can say, okay, I want to have a look at task 3. Excuse me, what page is that on? It's on page 4, and move to page 4 quickly and have a look at it. Okay. So that has got the learning objectives all down the side, and it's got the individual assessment criteria here. Excuse me. As I said, the workbooks will follow, it will meet all these criteria once they're completed, and then we'll identify them at the end. Okay. The last bit, yeah, there are 8 learning objectives here. I've left some assessment guidance here on the bottom, and actions needed to achieve the LOs and standard. I put that in when I did the outline for the course. What I will do is remove that each time I do an assessment. I'll remove this bit and write the assessment notes in there. Yeah.
Okay.
And I will also remove all this, and I'll put your assessment in there, saying, yeah, it's good, you've completed this, you've done this, that. And the last bit, it will have my name in here. It will have my signature on there when you've completed, and it will have the dates or dates when you've completed a piece of work. It may be 1, 2, or 3 dates on there when they were done. And I take that out as well, because when it's not achieved, I'll just leave it blank until it is, and put some notes in there to say what you need to do. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
And that is as much as I want to do tonight, because there's plenty of work could go out there. What I would suggest to you now is that you use the material on the VLE, make a start with some of the workbooks, and you can always drop back onto the information side to make sure you complete them, yeah?
Okay. Where did you get the assignment front sheet?
Where did I get what, sorry?
The assignment front sheet.
Right, just close that down. Yes. It's on here somewhere. It will say Unit 1 Assessment Suggested Evidence, yeah?
Okay, Unit 1.
It says F on there for front sheet. Perhaps I should have added that in. Right, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All your PowerPoints are down here, and your workbook tasks are here, yeah?
Yeah, I've already I've downloaded the workbook.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a matter of working through that now to start off with a workbook, pick out the things on here that are going to match up with what you need to know on there, have a read through it, use the material, and then actually write your piece off that. Yeah?
All right, okay.
Okay, have you got any questions for me?
No, I'll just have to look through the PowerPoint, and if I have any questions, email you.
Yeah, and don't forget, I will not do it tonight now, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll send you an email with with my phone number on, yeah? And you can text me back off that, then I'll have your number I can put into my phone, and then I'll know who it is. If you're sending me a text and you want to know something, I'll be able to answer you straight away, yeah?
Okay then, all right, no problem.
Okay, anyway, thanks for attending, Bridget.
Right.
That's been most useful, I hope. And we'll speak again next week. And when you need it, if you need me at all, just either mail me or I'll send me a text. Yeah.
All right. Okay then. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Super. Bye for now.
All right then. Bye.